Okay, great. Uh, Thanks for an above average debate, everyone. We came to a consensus decision. The ranking is as follows: the first to OO, the second to OG, the third to CG, and unfortunately the fourth to CO. Two overarching observations about this debate. The first is that in these sorts of rounds, I think it's very, very easy to fall into frames that are culturally proximate to ourselves in a way that uh, certain intuitions we have about the world because of our lived experience means that we don't really debate different frames and make them clash. Rather, we just try to mitigate away frames, e.g., saying things like tiger parenting is like not this debate, or like it's just probably different cultural starting points that make things sound intuitive or not within that characterization. This is like really annoying. I know I hate this stuff as well as a debater, but it's just like everyone, this is a global activity. The second thing is also to note when your frames are not mutually exclusive. So just saying the other team had a smaller frame or was more diminutive in number is not a sufficient enough like weighing response when we're talking about high magnitude, low number. And so I need framing not only on what is the probabilistic population we're talking about, but also how do I weigh high impact, low probability versus high probability, lower impact within rounds. Uh, so onto OA proper. I'm going to just do this piecewise, beginning from the fourth. Why does CO take the fourth? I think it's for two reasons. The first is that their contribution is derivative, that although the identity material and a lot of the refutation are marginally new, they are still derivative of OO. DLO covers a lot of the conservative parent material just using different examples and probably frame better examples and impacts with regards to whether or not those impacts are like symmetric in the view of OG. That is to say, all the identity exploration stuff with regards to drinking, with regards to the private sphere of children of conservative parents, is probably more realistic and less likely to be symmetric contextual to this round versus the CO reframing of this being identity issues such as trans identities. I think your inability to give a persuasive answer to the POI from OG is really, really damaging to your case. And then secondarily, being derivative and downstream from OO. So unfortunately, that means there's very little we can credit vis-a-vis the other teams. Let's deal with the closing government now, which was incredibly hard to place because I think you're in a position where if you if you like completely pull through, I think you do take the first, but unfortunately, the panel found you to fail on kind of four fronts on the contribution. The first is that you are mildly derivative on two key inflection points of your case to OG. What were those? The first is on the weighing into the long term. I think here you try to frame OG as just being about tiger parents, but I think their mechanisms cross apply to issues of when parents are overly strict or when there are other forms of impacts external to the world that can change the path dependency of a person's life, e.g., going to university. So the marginal newness of the mechanism on your side being that people do better in formal settings such as education is just not a persuasive addition or meaningful contribution in terms of this is already covered to a certain extent with an OG, especially the weighing on autonomy being a future looking and future weighed value, that people have more autonomy when they go to university, when they get good grades, etc. The second problem here is I think you're just trying to you try to reframe away from them in a way that by trying to avoid it being a knife is actually making you unable to get up over OG. What do I mean by this? GovWhip says this is not a knife. This is just another scenario that you don't want to talk about the subset of individuals going to juvie to all those issues. The problem is, even if this is smaller, this is incredibly high impact, right? So it does not contest within the debate that high impactness. You just say it's a smaller amount for all the framing reasons given up in the top of MG. That's very unhelpful weighing wise, because I don't know how much smaller amount those individuals are. And OG already weighs for me that these individuals are incredibly vulnerable. You just add on to that weighing by telling me that children overall are incredibly vulnerable. So it makes the vertical reframing incredibly difficult to credit. The third contribution is on the refutation to OO. A lot of this refutation happens within the OO frame, so it's very difficult unless you're coming up over OO for us to place you above OG, because I think your plan was just a combination of refutation to OO and then hoping that the reframing of OO was sufficient to be OG, and therefore you would be OG because you would contesting within the frame of OO. Unfortunately, OG, the reframing from O was not as powerful as you estimated it to be within the closing government. And the last edition of your case is just a lot of the material with regards to how you believe the vast majority would, a lot of the psychological failures that e.g. Impulse control and contextual usages of this pill, although persuasive within that frame, still needed more weighing as to why that frame took it above OG. Given that, let's chat about OG versus OO. Oh, and the final thing to note about the contextual usage is it's contingent on a framing that is coexistent with OO. So when a member of government tells us that, parents have a middle-class bias and a naturalistic fallacy, and there are all these characteristic preferences. I think the problem here is that this is very culturally contingent material, and also is just unclear why it cannot coexist with other incentive structures of OO in a way that at best mitigates, but at worst operates on different framing levels and therefore is non-responsive. Let's chat about top half then. OG OO goes like this. OG says this is comparatively less, the politeness pill is comparatively less harmful to agency and to the child than the alternative of corporal punishment or other incredibly punitive things. OO beats this back in two ways. By first reframing that the vast majority are not like this, and therefore is not a comparison between the politeness pill and corporal punishment, because the vast majority of people do not practice corporal punishment and also therefore would not trade off with this pill. But secondarily, for the individuals who are incredibly conservative or tiger parents or whatever label we want to throw on that, those individuals would use the pill in conjunction because the standard would raise and raise and raise. OG then attempts to respond to this by saying that the political incentive structures macro-wise, the left and right, would be such that there would be certain cultural restrictions, and CG echoes this too in other ways. But I think the problem here is this. If that is true, that at best takes out the material coming from OO about the collapse of macro funding for things like counselors at schools, which is decent. The problem is it does not get you as far as I think you thought it got you with regards to how people within that system would actually act. If they are tiger parents, they would act up. And for all the incentives that O gives about not wanting your child to be seen as the odd one out, that they would stick out more as a sore thumb, that you would catch more cultural flack for failing to give your child this pill, etc. And then we get parallel rebuttal. That's just rebuttal that is not direct, but just kind of other scenarios and other incentives from both government teams, and especially at OG to give counter characterization about different instances. But that is incredibly unhelpful in this portion of the debate, because they're just coexistent or different pools of people. And specifically, OO is attacking you on your initial characterization where your positive material comes out, which is when you want to compare on harm reduction of the methods of coercion towards those children. The second thing O does is really come away with the agency debate. On the first level, by mechanizing how this pill would work and doing quite strategic debate meta things within the LO by telling us what our base assumptions can and should be within this round. With a very speculative technology and why that harms desires in a way that is bad. But secondarily, by adding more positive material here, by explaining why the alternative ways in which we gain knowledge and gain discipline within ourselves are longer lasting. And both gov teams just then counter assert, but you habituate yourself in the same way antidepressants or ADHD medication can. But as O explains, the desire doesn't go away, and this doesn't change your preferences. And specifically, that rebelling as a child is a safer space because you are more politically popular and there are more like institutions to catch you in this space. That means you are able to have lesser consequences, which both gov teams concede is important. That was a very long OA. Sorry for going 2 minutes over. Feel free to message any of us. We came to consensus, and I'm sure my panelists will have many fruitful thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.